a big threat. It's one of those threats that feels too big to tackle, right?
If we don't do something about it immediately, it's going to be catastrophic.
Climate change is something that affects every single part of our lives.
You know, it all points to the fact that there's climate change.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that the foreshore DPA is put in place so that any new builds along the foreshore or activity on the foreshore have to be reviewed and approved by staff. And that's to make sure you're having safe builds or you're not building closer on the foreshore in a way that might be destructive to the eco-environment that we're trying to achieve there. I think it's a very new and complicated subject. And I think we're committed to working to the best solution. Right now it feels uncomfortable for me because the way it's set up, and I'm talking about the flood construction level, it seems to be demanding a build that's very uncomfortable in communities. And you know, I'd like to work towards finding a formula that allows new builds, safe builds, that isn't so disruptive to the community and the feel of that community. West Vancouver has the most waterfront residential homes, so it does affect our residents more than any other community. But of course it also affects our areas and parklands, public parklands, and we want to protect those. For the first time since I've been on council, I think ever, we've presented an environmental levy as part of our budget. So that means that we always allocate a certain percent of our budget to climate change initiatives. There are some really big things we can do that would cost a lot of money and take a lot of time. And I think we have to know what they are and look for the right opportunities to partake in them. For instance, this foreshore protection group, they're the ones that developed all the large rocks in front of the current seawall that to date have protected it. But that's now becoming less effective. And they have some really good ideas about building reefs and stuff further out to create a safer foreshore interaction. And you know, I'd just love to keep working with them and learning from them. You know, there's areas of West Van where, you know, they're highly vulnerable to runoff and storm surge. We are seeing an increase in storms and things like that. But the people who live in these areas are often willing to invest, you know, time and resource and expertise to mitigate that. And if we can partner with them as a district and help them come to these solutions together, I think that's a great way to go. The district in some of its studies has suggested things like building dikes farther out, but I'm not quite sure how achievable that is or realistic. It's certainly something we could do. I don't know if you've seen the ferry building has now been elevated. So anything that gets a reconstruction of sorts is going to be elevated and protected for future concern there. The sea level rise has seemed to be a component of flooding threat, and the bigger one seems to be storm surge runoff, right? And there's various different thoughts around the fact that, you know, we're building a lot above the highway and higher into the mountains, which means we don't have as much land absorbing water, so there's more runoff, right? And creating more pooling down here. We are the only municipality in British Columbia, and I'm not sure even where else, that has the rights to manage their foreshore. So it's called, we have a foreshore lease. Typically, that's governed by the province or the feds, depending on how far out you go. And because of that, when you buy waterfront property, this is where you start to apply for your foreshore DPAs. And that, again, ensures our ability to make sure you're not doing any harmful activity or disturbing the foreshore unnecessarily. And it also gives us the opportunity to manage how we do protect against sea level rise and things like that.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with the heavy winds and crashing waves that have been battering BC's south coast. The extreme conditions are causing flooding.
The January storm caused a lot more damage than previous storms. It's a big financial burden for a small club. You know, the fact is with large tides and strong winds, it's becoming easier and easier for the main wall to be breached. And once that happens, significant damage is happening. The storms we've been seeing have become more frequent and more intense. It's just not safe enough for us to be there anymore.
That was a really interesting storm because the storm seemed to swirl around the inlet and attacked the seawall. If you saw those photos, the waves were 20 feet high. And they did a lot of damage, and a lot of the damage comes from, again, throwing logs up on the shelf, right? And they used to just put them back down on the rocks there, but now they're starting to actually take them away, cut them up and chip them up and get rid of them, but more logs show up. You know, it all points to the fact that there's climate change, and whether that is the actual sea level rise or the way of the surges and things like that, and how much of each factors into it, I don't quite fully understand enough to say it's because of that.
Excessive heat.
I wouldn't say it has per se, personally, aside from clearly the heat that's occurred the last couple of summers, but you know, we're okay in that sense, but personally it hasn't really affected us.
Personally, when it gets cold when it's not supposed to be cold and warm when it's not supposed to be warm, that's personal, but also secondarily, just watching the people who are consumed by fire or floods, that's awful. It makes me feel bad.
I'd say 8.
I would say 10.
It's real.
It's 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's happening. You know.
Well, I'm definitely up there with the 8s and 9s. If we don't do something about it immediately, it's going to be catastrophic.
It's a big problem.
Yeah.
I worry about leaving my children and my grandchildren to the mess that we have created.
And the thing that worries me is that we've been saying that now for 10 years, I think, and we haven't really put a dent in the effects, so I'm scared.
I would say not, given West Van. I think there's other areas that are probably way more affected.
No, I don't think it is. I know we've had some bad spells. We had bad spring, and last year we had the heat dome. But no, it's a lot worse elsewhere. I think the US is getting smacked, and parts of Europe.
I think rising water levels is a concern. Again, not affected, I don't think, in West Van. I don't see it, but not to say that it couldn't happen.
Oh, definitely. When you see what's happening with the king tides and all of the buildings that are being flooded all the way across Marine Drive, that never used to happen. And I think that's a direct result of global warming.
Where we live, or West Van, is my perception that it's not going to be affected. Other places will be affected first. Other aspects will be affected first.
But we're kind of protected from it in West Van, I think. You know, when you look and see what's happening in the rest of the world, we're pretty lucky to be here.
I see the rising temperatures. I feel the rising temperatures. It's like hotter now. I just came back from my skin clinic and she told me all this is because of the climate change. It's affecting even the body, and from the last 3 years I've been going through histamine intolerance. So the climate change, which has affected the soil nutrition, it has affected our, the food chain. Back when I finished my environmental management master's, this was back in 1998, I was really angry with the way things were, but now I've come into an advocacy mode.
There's some people that say that it really hasn't changed that much. What we do know, though, is our storms are getting stronger, which creates a stronger surge. And, as the foreshore erodes, you get different behavior as well.
For this fight, and we are trying to protect that sacred river from the coastal GasLink pipeline.
Basically just a really great community event, enriching our collective, engaging our community. We basically want to promote like networking, getting to know each other. We had a bunch of vendors as well, all like BIPOC owned artists, majority like women led.
My name is Allison Bodine. I organize with Climate Convergence, Metro Vancouver, so we're a grassroots climate justice coalition. We organize locally against the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the Coastal GasLink Pipeline, the Site C Dam, and other climate-destroying projects. And then we work internationally to try and connect the climate justice movement, because people are doing really good work outside of Canada and we don't hear enough about it.
My name's Squid, and I'm here with Save Old Growth. We're a group of people who are fighting to protect the old growth forest here in BC.
I think for so many years it was really apparent in other communities. I mean, we're talking about people that live in already very difficult situations, having flooding and droughts and the mass migration of like millions of people due to the changing climate. But people in Canada have been like fairly ignorant about it. But now we have earthquakes and fires, and everything is right in our faces, and we can see it affecting our neighborhoods and our community.
Last summer we saw the heat dome. 619 people died. The fact that we're not taking proper action about it now on any like corporate or government level, to me is just a sign that they're not serving the people anymore. They're serving their wallets.
Eight and a half.
9.
8.
3.
10.
7.
8.
6.
10. 10.
Like a 10.
8 out of 10.
Definitely a 9.
I'd say probably like 6 or 7.
I think it's a 9 out of 10 for the importance to me, because last year my family was affected by the heat, specifically my mom.
9 because it's a very pressing issue for young people.
Like a 7. I mean, over here, it's just been turning, the winter's really hot now.
I think it's like a 10 out of 10 because we're so young, and like the people that are like in charge, like that could fix these things are old, so they don't like care.
I think it's a 4 out of 10. It's overrated and exaggerated.
Around like a 3, because simply I don't really understand and I don't really care.
The heat wave and flooding was pretty significant, and I think it affected everybody.
A lot of people are affected by climate change, and it will affect our future, like a lot, if we don't fix it.
Looking back in the summer, it was ridiculously hot. I don't think West Bend is equipped to deal with these changing temperatures.
I don't want the earth to burn in hell.
For me, I have to say it'd be a 10 out of 10. Part of my job is I have to teach young kids about climate change, and when I have to put it down in simplistic terms for them, it's still very clear how grave the situation is.
Well, climate change is causing a drastic change in a lot of people's lives, and especially the quality of life across the world.
It's changing drastically every year. Every year it's getting hotter and hotter. A couple years ago, I remember how bad the forest fires were, so like 10 for sure. I also have to treat them for things like heat stroke and such because we work on the beach, and I can see how it's affecting kids, adults, and the elderly, and it's really important that we make changes now.
It's an unknown, and we have to be aware of it, and I think we are. You know, we are taking measures to say we're going to get ourselves educated, put in policies, start better practices around building, around the waterfront. You know, I wish I was that great scientist. Right now, I read staff reports and I do as much reading on the subject as possible, and just keep an open mind with each decision we have ahead of us. I think we're a solutions-oriented, intelligent community, and you know, with that respect, you ask how vulnerable is West Van. You know, as much as anywhere, I guess, but I also think we have people here who will drive that innovation and ideas. And it really is about that. It's much like my work as a counselor. You know, you can read and form your own ideas, but when you start talking to people in the real situation and the real circumstances and understand the complexity of all these issues, it just helps you put into a place where the more I learn about stuff, the less I worry about it. You know, there's only so much we can do, and as long as we're doing all we can and helping other people to educate them, I just think it's the best thing we can do.